Channel 11 presents Talk It Over. Here's your host, Ellen Adelstein.
Welcome to Talk It Over this evening. My guest is Bruce Babbitt, who is the Attorney General of the state of Arizona. Welcome, Bruce.
Ellen, it's a pleasure to be here again.
Bruce, how have you enjoyed your job so far?
Well, it depends on what time of day, in which week you ask me. I would say that I didn't dream how difficult the job was going to be, and particularly the last 2 years with this tremendous cascade of criminal problems and political problems. And at times, I wonder why I did it. But honestly, 70% of the time, it's been exciting, a tremendous sense of satisfaction, and I'd do it all over again.
You would?
Sure.
Okay. Do you have a staff that really helps you a great deal?
Yeah, that's one change that I've noticed. We really started from scratch. There had never been, for example, any antitrust enforcement. I had to go out and recruit a staff straight out of law school. The Attorney General didn't have any real criminal prosecution power, and when we got the state grand jury, I had to go recruit prosecutors out of law school and build a staff. And they're functioning now, and it gives me a little more time to step back and sort of look onto the horizon and see where we go from here. So it does change, and I think the institution is starting to build and perpetuate itself.
Well, I do know that you have one of our former county attorneys on your staff, Bill Schaefer.
Bill Schaefer is one of the most remarkable human beings I've ever met anywhere. I didn't really know him until the Don Bolles murder case. I got all tangled up in a huge political fight with an inept county attorney in Phoenix, and after consultation with the governor, we were put in charge. And I went to Bill Schaefer and said, you recognize this is going to be a year and a half, 2 years out of your life. And without a second's thought, he took that on, and he's the only person in this state who could have handled a case of that complexity. And the people of this state owe an awful lot to that guy.
Yes. The reason I asked you, it was obviously a pointed question, but I know Bill Schaefer, knew him when he was down here as a deputy county attorney. Then he became county attorney. And there is no finer lawyer, I would say, criminal lawyer. Plus, he is almost from the television image of bad and wrong is wrong, and it must be punished, and it must be dealt with correctly.
The other thing that fascinates me about Bill is he is a career prosecutor of a kind you hardly ever find. He doesn't have political ambitions. I tried to get him to run for county attorney in Phoenix. I said, Bill, get out there, get up front, run your own office. And his response was, I'm not in it because I want a political career. I'm in it because I want to be a career prosecutor. And
okay.
We're lucky to have him.
All right. Let's come back in a few minutes, and we'll talk about the Don Bolles case and Bill Schaefer. We'll be right back. Bruce, talking about the Don Bolles case, would you trace it for us now, as the Attorney General, from the moment that it happened to the present point?
Well, it's been a fascinating odyssey, and of course, at the moment that the murder happened, I had no idea that I was on a target list. I only learned that many months later. At the outset, the question was, how would the case be prosecuted? There were a lot of problems in the county attorney's office in Phoenix. I went down to the county attorney and said, let's get together and do this cooperatively. That all broke down when
Now, is it correct that the county attorney originally had the jurisdiction in Phoenix?
That's absolutely correct. It's in a murder case, presumptively, it's for the county attorney, and I certainly felt it belonged there. But we had a tremendously unstable county attorney's office with problems, morale problems, a lack of leadership. We got Bill Schaefer into it. I persuaded the county attorney that we must do that. And we got about 6 months into the case, and that broke down because there was a new county attorney who, as you will remember, got up in front of the cameras and started making a lot of wild allegations. There was a mistrial on the eve of the first John Harvey Adamson trial because of his statements. And at that point, I remember very clearly, I called up DPS and had them fly me to Tucson, found Governor Castro the very day that that mistrial was called, and said, this can't go on. It's being mishandled. by a county attorney who is simply not responsible, we must be put in charge of the case. And that was really the first kind of complicated problem that had to be ironed out. And Governor Castro, to his lasting credit, in a very difficult political situation, made the right decision, knowing that it might come back on him if there weren't convictions. He did it, he did his duty, and Bill Schaefer then got straight into the heart of the case. The second big hurdle, of course, was what to do with John Harvey Adamson. The trial came back to Tucson. There's jury selection going on, unknown to the public. We are talking with him on a nightly basis about whether or not there will be a plea bargain. That poses a problem. A plea bargain is an unhappy thing. Plea bargaining is under attack. In fact, I ran for office saying, I'm not going to do any plea bargaining. All of a sudden, I found myself making the biggest plea bargain in the history of the state, simply saying, in effect, we're going to do less than perfect justice for John Harvey Adamson by reducing the charge and giving him 20 years in exchange for his testimony. We're going to do less than perfect justice for him in order to do justice for a lot of other people who can only be gotten with his testimony. I think that decision proved correct, again, by subsequent events, by the convictions that followed.
In a case like that, how do you know that the person who's doing the plea bargaining is leveling with you? How do you know that, how do you ascertain whether they're just making up a wild story to save their necks? And how do you know whether you've got enough good stuff to go ahead and prosecute the other people that you're making this plea bargain for?
Well, of course, you never know whether it was a good bargain and whether you've got the evidence until you go ahead and prosecute and the jury convicts. But when a co-conspirator decides to turn state's evidence, you've got to check the testimony. And it took literally weeks of checking by the Phoenix Police Department on a daily basis as he told us what had happened to verify, comparing his own story for consistency and then going out to verify events. And it's a complex process.
But you were satisfied that you were getting the real truth.
Yeah, and I still am. John Harvey Adamson, for all of the allegations about his character, and he would be the first, I think, to say that he's led a less than reputable life, to say the very least. For all of those problems, he has proven to be a very truthful witness. We used him in the conviction of Jimmy Robeson and Max Dunlap after the trial last fall. The jury believed him there. He was the state's witness in a collateral case out in Scottsdale that involved the beating up of a talent agent. You may remember that was kind of a related case that we prosecuted. The jury convicted in that case. Last week in San Diego, he testified in yet another trial involving Jimmy Robeson again and a lawyer named Neil Roberts. It looks like the jury may very well convict in that case, although they haven't yet made a final decision. That adds up to the fact that he's a credible witness. He's kept, thus far, his part of the bargain.
How far are we down the line from seeing the last of this case?
Well, in my opinion, the last of it is a long way off. When you have a conspiracy murder of this kind, it's going to be a long process, because if you're lucky and if you get anybody at all, the person you're going to get at the outset is the person at the scene of the murder. People you really want to get are the people who weren't at the scene of the murder and who aren't directly related to it, who ordered and contracted for the killing. And as you go up this pyramid, it gets progressively more difficult because they're further away from the scene of the crime, and it depends more and more on the testimony of accomplices. You've got to do it one step at a time. First it was John Harvey Adamson. A year later, convictions of Dunlap and Robeson. The investigation continues. It may continue for 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. We'll simply have to pick apart every shred of evidence, keep prosecuting people, and follow it wherever it leads, knowing that it gets more and more difficult, and that, you know, the string connecting it all could be cut by a misstep anyway along the line.
do you feel that the person at the head of that string is really someone well-known, or people well-known, like the original press said, linking it to very prominent Arizona respectable figures?
Well, obviously I've got my own ideas, but I've got an ethical and constitutional problem about speculating about anybody's involvement specifically until the time comes that they're charged. Now, the state presented a theory at the trial, and that's a matter of public record. I believe the state's theory of the case, as we presented it at the trial, and it certainly did implicate other people, quite specifically. I believe that's an accurate theory of the case. Only time will tell.
What went through your mind when you found out you were on the hit list?
It was an extraordinary sensation. I learned that from Bill Schaefer on a Sunday afternoon, a rather rainy, cold a Sunday afternoon in January of last year. And I remember I went home very shortly thereafter, just totally aware of the world around me. I could hear the sound of running water. I picked up my child and gave him a bath, helped my wife cook dinner, just thinking, my God, you know, it is really an incredible gift to be here and to sense all this and to simply be participating and alive at this moment. A little later on, I think the fear sets in, not on any lasting basis, but you know, inevitably there is some of that too.
Did you feel a little bit down the road like enough is enough with politics or government, and this is too much, and I really wish that I hadn't run for this and I'd like to get out? Or did you come back and say, I'm going to get those guys and they'll, you know, what type of reaction did you have?
Really, neither one of those. I think that after the initial kind of responses faded away, it was basically a feeling of acceptance, kind of that any job involves some risks, and you shouldn't overdo or over-dramatize or get psyched out by it. It's an occupational hazard. The chances of it actually happening, statistically, are quite low, and you know, other people undergo risks in any job, whether it's a television camera falling on your head or getting killed in a traffic accident. Everybody is exposed to some liability, you know, some prospects of danger, and you really just accept it that way and don't really spend a lot of time thinking about it.
Okay. I want to ask you about the Babbitt family, but let's take a commercial first. We'll be back. Bruce, tell me something about the Babbitt family, because Bruce Babbitt in Pima County is our Attorney General. We know that he's really fought hard for us, fought the bad guys, done a lot of antitrust. But in the northern part of the state, the name Babbitt means more than that.
Well, I guess the best analogy I could draw is there are almost as many Babbitts in northern Arizona as there appear to be DeConcinis in Pima County.
Gee, do the rest of us have any chance at all?
or Udalls in eastern Arizona, maybe. On a more personal level, my wife is a lawyer. She practices in Phoenix. We have two very young children, one 2.5 years old and one 4 months old. And
congratulations.
We lead a pretty quiet life, as you can imagine, both of us working. We spend the rest of our time at home, and it's good.
But I was referring more to the Bruce Babbitt that grew up. What kind of family did he grow up in? What does the Babbitt family mean up north?
Well, up north when I grew up was a very rural environment. Flagstaff was a very small town. My family has been involved in ranching and a lot of outdoor kind of focus. A very traditional family, large, 6 children, 4 brothers, and a sister. Went up through the local schools, spent summers working at the family grocery store or on one of the ranches. Really had never been out of town much until I went away to college. Catholic family, Notre Dame was the place to go. That's where I went. The first time I'd really been out of Arizona is when I got on the train to go to Chicago, to go to Indiana, to go to college. a lot of virtues to that kind of environment, obviously. It's good.
I know that you did some work in the 60s in the South. Would you tell us about it?
Yeah, I went through college and graduate school, went to law school, got my degree. Didn't want to practice law. I just wasn't really ready for it. And I went to Washington and joined the poverty program during the Johnson administration, and was sent down south to do civil rights work for the government, sort of policing the contracting of government funds, making sure that there was no discrimination in Head Start programs, legal services programs, that kind of thing. And again, it was an extraordinary 2 years that's meant a lot to me, because I saw a great deal of the South at a time when it was in transition, and there were a lot of difficult problems, and came away with a real experience, and hopefully contributed a little bit to some of the solutions.
I imagine that you had a real carpetbagger problem, because you really, fit the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, although you just said Catholic, figure coming down to the South, and, what is this guy doing here when he doesn't know what we're facing and our problems are?
As a matter of fact, my wife is a Southerner, and I remember her father, I think probably tongue-in-cheek when we were going out together, she lived in South Texas, looking at me and saying, "Bruce, even though you're a Yankee, and even though you went to Harvard, and even though you're a Catholic," and I don't know which of those three is the worst, but they're all awfully bad. And to him, being from Arizona was being a Yankee. He said, even despite all those things, I think we might be able to get along. I suppose the ultimate compliment.
Tell me a little bit more about your wife, because many of us have not met her, and I understand that she's quite an individualist.
Well, she is. I married her when she was still attending Sweetbriar College in Virginia. Really had no idea that she would want to go on eventually to law school and have a career of her own, all of which she's done. She graduated from ASU, joined a Phoenix law firm, and has gotten a great deal of satisfaction out of the practice of law, and is in many ways a better lawyer than I am, a more natural kind of adversary who likes to mix it up in court. We have had a family along the way, and I've learned a lot about what it is to share a lot of chores, and it's worked out quite well. I talked to a lawyer last night in Tucson who was reminding me that he got a conference call one morning to discuss a legal problem and heard a baby crying in the background. And I said, yeah, I was babysitting that morning, but it works.
Good for you. It makes you a better father, and it makes for a better, happy family for the children,
well,
to have both mother and father there.
At least in our case. I can't generalize for the rest of the world, but the added participation on my part, because of both of us having careers, has brought us, I think, much closer together in many ways. It has worked, I think.
Is she a general attorney, or does she specialize in something?
She's really a litigator. She tries cases. She works in a law firm of about 12 or 15 lawyers, a fair amount of personal injury work, commercial litigation, and it's been an interesting experience for her, going into law at the very time that it's finally really opening up to women, trying cases in rural counties where they've never seen a woman lawyer, that kind of thing.
That kind of thing. Okay, we'll take one more commercial, and I want to ask you about your book. We'll be back. Bruce, your law degree was from Harvard, I believe.
That's right.
But what was your master's in, and where did you get it?
Well, growing up in northern Arizona, I suppose it was not unusual that I got interested in geology when I went to college, and I took a degree in geology, and I then went to England for 2 years to do graduate work in geophysics, and wrote a thesis involving these theories of continental drift and all that sort of stuff, and almost became an academic before I kind of decided that the ivory tower wasn't for me, that I wanted to be working in a world of the marketplace of people rather than ideas.
But your new book is about your first love, I guess.
Well, kind of. I have done a little writing about Arizona history and natural science on the side. The book actually that is floating around, it hasn't been a bestseller, but I really enjoyed writing. It is a biography of an old-time Arizona artist, a landscape painter, artist who lived up in the Hopi villages around 1900 and who was just kind of an interesting character. And I got involved in that because of my sort of feeling for Arizona history. And one thing led to another, and I actually wrote this biography. It was published by Northland Press up in Flagstaff, and it was an entertaining project. I don't have time to do those things anymore.
But that was your second book, was it not?
Well, that was number one. Number two is pretty much in process right now, and it consists of, it's a little more scientific. It's an anthology of the best writings about the Grand Canyon which is, it's a geologist's paradise and has always been something I've been interested in. I've collected all of the good writings of the Grand Canyon, from the Spaniards who discovered it down through Major Powell, who first ran the river rapids through the canyon, some of the geological writings, some of the literary kind of, through the eyes of the literary tourist kind of thing, and put them all together in an anthology and written several kind of lengthy essays tying it all together. That book should be out. I've been working on that one for a long time in bits and pieces. I would guess probably the end of this year.
Who's publishing it?
Again, Northland Press in Flagstaff.
In Flagstaff. Is that sort of what you do for recreation?
Well, believe it or not, it really is relaxation after the chaos of working in an office. I never believed that writing could be relaxation, just sitting quietly and writing. But it is. After the chaos of dealing with people in the legislature all day, it really is relaxation.
Well, switching from a relaxing subject to an unrelaxing one, I know you've been very active in antitrust work. Your office has. Can you tell us anything about that?
Yeah, it's very basic stuff. Back in 1974, when I ran for office, I really felt that the antitrust laws, which we've had pretty good antitrust laws since statehood, ought to be enforced. And I had observed from my own sort of experience in that area that they weren't being enforced. And the antitrust laws basically, I view as a guarantee that the free enterprise system will work. It's sort of the rules that say if we're going to have a competitive free enterprise society, you got to be competitive. You can't fix prices. You can't allocate territories. And when laws aren't enforced, people start violating them. I mean, that's just human nature. And the people who violate them get a competitive advantage over the people who are trying to obey them. And that's not fair. That the violators should win out over the people who want to do business honestly. That's what it's all about. The antitrust law is hopefully a policeman in the market of free enterprise. And we've tried to do that. We have filed price-fixing suits, several in Pima County, a number in Phoenix, and involving a lot of industries, frankly. Concrete and aggregate, towing, the funeral industry, bread, and we'll keep doing it until we have created enough deterrence so that people won't do it. And I hope we'll eventually reach that. We haven't yet, but I think we're making some progress.
Would that be classified as white-collar crime, then, people who are violating the trust laws?
Well,
or is that a different?
Antitrust is a complex area. I think the guy who is out, the sophisticated businessman who is out fixing prices with his competitors, it's not a crime under Arizona law, but I view it as akin to criminal activity. There are some other kinds of antitrust violations, much more technical, much more wrapped up in economic theory, that can often be classified as innocent mistakes. And if that's the case, we don't prosecute with the full force of the law. But I think increasingly we're coming to view it where it's done knowingly and with an intent to violate the law as a criminal type problem. Yes.
Is there as much organized crime in Arizona as all the eastern media make us think?
Well, Ellen, I think there's kind of a certain irony in the reporters who came out here from such notoriously utopian cities as New York, Newark, Chicago, St. Louis to tell us how bad it is in Arizona. Is it bad? We let things get out of hand. It's not as bad as it is back there, but it will be unless we get hold of it in time. I think we're doing that. And I think that if we keep at it for a few more years, we'll get it turned around before it becomes endemic.
Okay. Thank you very much for being with us, Bruce Babbitt, Attorney General, State of Arizona, on Talk It Over.
You've been watching Talk It Over with your host, Ellen Adelstein. Join us every week at this same time for Talk It Over here on Channel 11. The preceding program was pre-recorded.